Hello and welcome to Jaw Law. I'm your host, Joe McGregor from Dallas, Texas, and today we are going to be talking about insurance coverage. Any material communicated on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. Nothing herein should be considered to create an attorney-client relationship. Please consult an attorney for legal advice on your matter. Okay, today we are going to be talking about insurance coverage, but it's probably not the insurance coverage that you're thinking. When we talk about insurance coverage, I think in dentistry, first thing we think about is malpractice insurance, not what we're talking about today. I think one of the next things we think about is probably like life insurance, how we are covered. Also not what we're talking about. We also think about insurance payments. Not what we're talking about. The reason we are talking about what we're talking about is because it is something that people just don't think about, and that is business insurance. When it comes to business insurance, it's probably best left to be explained by an insurance expert, and my suggestion to you is to seek one out, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But basically, what's happening, and maybe this is too simplified of an explanation, but it suits our purposes here today, which is you are going to face certain risks as a business owner. You're going to have the risk that some tornado or hurricane or something's going to come through and destroy your practice. A flood is going to come through. You run the risk of a patient slipping and falling and suing you. You run the risk of your employee stealing money from you. Run the risk of a cyber attack holding hostage your patient records, or any number of risks. You have risk as a business owner. So if you own a practice or you are going to own a practice, you are going to have risk. Now, there's not really a law that says you have to have insurance. The default at law is that you self-insure. So if a water pipe busts in your office, you're the one who has to pay for the resulting damages. If your employee sues you and there is a settlement payment to make, you're the one who makes that settlement payment, and so forth and so forth. Because we don't necessarily feel comfortable always self-insuring, we go to the insurance market and we say, hey, insurance company, I face all these risks. Will you please cover me? I will pay you a certain amount a month, and you promise that if any one of the things on this list happen, you're going to step in and you are going to pay X dollars for that. If you want them to pay more than X dollars, then you pay more per month. And it's pretty simple. I think we all know how insurance works. So why am I talking about it? The primary reason we are talking about it. This is probably especially geared for those of you who have leases. Your lease is almost positively going to require that you have a business policy insurance. And for those of you who have borrowed money from a bank, most of the times the banks are also going to require you to have an insurance policy as well. And this is because the bank is protecting its assets and the landlord is protecting its asset. And so they are mandating that you have coverage so that you're not in a place where one of these risks happen and it just bankrupts you and they're out of a tenant or out of a borrower. The problem that we see is that when someone's starting a practice or someone is buying a practice, there's 1,000 things that are going on in their life. And checking the box of getting insurance is one of them. And so they'll reach out to someone who sells insurance, and that person will sell them a policy. Oftentimes, though, that person doesn't know anything about your business and or doesn't know what's required of your business. And I say that because what we run into regularly is someone will have a lease. They will have an obligation to get a policy. They'll go get the policy.
the person who sells them the policy won't do anything in terms of looking at the lease and understanding what's covered. So they sell them a policy, you pay on this insurance for years, and one day, 7 years later, something happens. You think, okay, well, this is what insurance is for. It's why I've been paying these premiums. Let me call them up. And they deny you. You're like, well, why would you deny me? I've been paying this insurance policy all this time. And they give you a copy of your policy, and you see that the thing that just happened to you is specifically excluded from your coverage. And you're like, well, why didn't I know about this? The reason you didn't know about it is because the person who sold it to you didn't take the time to ensure that the things you were responsible for are covered. So, all of you who own a practice or who will own a practice, I can't implore you enough that when you go buy your business insurance, that you insist that whoever's selling it to you, that they look at your lease, because you do not want to be in a situation where 7 years later, you find out that plate glass was excluded from your coverage and plate glass is what just broke. Or tenant improvements was excluded from your coverage and tenant improvements is what just broke. Whatever the case may be, you need to make sure that the person who sells it to you looks at your lease. What is my client responsible for? Let me make sure the coverage covers them so that there are no surprises. And that way, if something is missed, you have a legitimate gripe to go after them and say, listen, I tasked you with making sure it was fully covered and you missed something. Let's talk about your malpractice insurance. So I'm bringing this up because this has become a bigger problem lately as clients have bought practices. We buy so many practices. And with a few thousand clients out there, things happen, especially weather events. Things get old, compressors get old, pipes get old, things fall apart and they cause damage. Something is going to happen to your practice one day and you're hoping it's minimal and something you can laugh about. But sometimes it's not. It's something serious. It's something significant. And you need to call up your insurance and have faith that when you call up the insurance, that whatever it was that just happened, it's going to be covered because your broker took the time to ensure that all reasonable risks were accommodated. And by the way, just one point on that. I'm not asking like, oh, you got to have alien invasion insurance or something, not these random weird stuff. I'm saying the things that have been troubling and vexing our clients have been if the broker had simply looked at the lease and said, my client's responsible for something that basically every tenant is responsible for, none of this would happen. So this is just regular stuff. You need to insist that you're going to pay all that money to insurance, that it's the right insurance. If you have any questions about this, give me a call. My cell phone is 972-975-2215, and my email is jmcgregor@mcgregorfirm.com. I'm Joseph McGregor with the law firm of McGregor & Oblad, dental specific attorneys based out of Dallas, Texas. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We'll see you next time.